Have you ever held a letter in your hands that you knew would either heal your heart or break it completely? A letter that arrived 10 years too late, yet somehow at exactly the right moment? Well, hello there, my dear friends. I'm Joe, and at 60, I've learned that some of the most important conversations we'll ever have happen in silence. And some of the deepest wounds we carry are the ones we inflict on the people we love most. I want to share with you a story about pride and pain, about the terrible cost of stubborn silence, and about how love, real, bone-deep, unconditional love, can bridge even the widest chasm between two broken hearts. It's a story about my brother Danny and me, and the 10 years we spent as strangers to each other. 10 years of birthdays uncelebrated, holidays unshared, and words left unspoken. 10 years that could have been filled with laughter and memories, but instead were marked by an empty chair in every family gathering and a phone that never rang with his voice on the other end. But most importantly, it's a story about a letter that arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. Written in handwriting I recognized immediately, despite the years that had passed. A letter that began with the words I'd been both hoping and dreading to hear. Joe, I need to tell you what Dad said about you before he died. You know, if stories like this one resonate with you, if they feel like conversations with an old friend who understands that life is messy and complicated and beautiful all at once, you might want to stay close. We're building something meaningful here together. One shared experience at a time, one hard-won lesson at a time. But let me take you back to the beginning, because every story of reconciliation starts with a story of separation. And sometimes, the deepest cuts come from the sharpest truths. And picture this. It's Thanksgiving Day, 2008, and I'm standing in the kitchen of my childhood home in Richmond, Virginia. The same kitchen where Danny and I had eaten countless bowls of cereal before school, where Mom had bandaged our scraped knees and scolded us for tracking mud across her clean floor. The same kitchen where we'd shared our dreams and fears as boys. Never imagining that someday we'd stand in that very spot as grown men, hurling words at each other like weapons. Dad was 73 then, still sharp as a tack, but moving a little slower than he used to. He'd been diagnosed with the early stages of Parkinson's disease 6 months earlier. And though he was handling it with his typical stubborn grace, we could all see the subtle changes. The slight tremor in his hands when he reached for his coffee cup. The way he'd pause sometimes in the middle of a sentence, searching for a word that had always come easily before. Danny had driven down from Baltimore with his wife Sarah and their 2 kids, my nephew Tommy, who was 8, and my niece Emma, who was 5. It should have been a perfect family gathering. Mom had outdone herself with the turkey. The house smelled like mom and cinnamon. And the table was set with the good china she only brought out for special occasions. But there was tension in the air, thick as gravy and twice as hard to swallow. Danny and I had been circling each other all day like 2 dogs in a yard. Polite but wary, we'd managed to avoid any real conversation, sticking to safe topics like the weather and the football game playing on the TV in the living room. But I could feel something building between us. The way you can feel a storm coming hours before the first drops of rain. The explosion came during dessert. Mom had just served her famous apple pie and the one with the lattice crust that had taken her 40 years to perfect, when Danny made what he probably thought was an innocent comment about Dad's condition. You know, Joe, he said, cutting into his pie with more force than necessary. It might be time to start thinking about getting Dad some help around the house. Mom's not getting any younger either. I felt my jaw tighten. What kind of help? I don't know, ma'am. A home health aide. Someone to help with the yard work, maybe some light housekeeping, just to take some of the pressure off Mom. Sarah nodded in agreement. There are some wonderful services available now. Very professional, very discreet. I set down my fork and looked at my brother, really looked at him for the first time all day. Danny was 2 years younger than me, but you'd never know it. At 41, He was already going gray at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there the last time we'd really talked. And he'd done well for himself, worked his way up to senior management at a tech company, owned a beautiful house in the suburbs, took his family on vacations to places I'd only seen in magazines. But sitting there in our childhood kitchen, all I could see was the same little brother who'd always thought he knew better than everyone else. "Dad doesn't need help," I said carefully. "He's managing just fine." As he, though, Danny's voice had that edge to it that I remembered from our childhood fights. "Did you see him trying to carve the turkey? His hands were shaking so bad I thought he was going to drop the knife. He carved the turkey just fine. Come on, it's Joe, you can't tell me you haven't noticed." The way he forgets things, the way he gets confused sometimes. In a month when I called, he couldn't remember what day it was. I felt heat rising in my chest. "So what are you saying? That we should just ship him off to some nursing home?" "I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that we need to be realistic about what's coming. We need to plan." I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the linoleum floor. "Since when is there a we in this family decisions? Danny, you live 3 hours away. You visit maybe 4 times a year. When's the last time you called Dad just to talk? When's the last time you asked Mom how she's doing?" Danny's face flushed red. "That's not fair, and you know it. I have a Joe, I have responsibilities. I can't just drop everything and drive down here every weekend like you do. Nobody's asking you to. But maybe don't waltz in here on holidays and start making decisions about our parents' lives when you don't even know what's really going on." "Our parents," Danny repeated, emphasizing the word. "Last I checked, they were my parents too. And just because you've appointed yourself the official caretaker doesn't mean you get to make all the decisions." The kitchen had gone dead quiet. Mom was staring at her hands, folded in her lap. Dad was looking back and forth between us with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, but something deeper. Something that looked like fear. Sarah was gathering the kids, whispering something about going to watch TV in the living room. Tommy kept looking back over his shoulder at us, his 8-year-old eyes wide with confusion and worry. I should have stopped then. Should have taken a deep breath, sat back down, and found a way to bridge the gap that was opening between my brother and me, and should have remembered that we were both scared, both struggling with the reality of watching our parents age, both trying to do the right thing in our own imperfect ways. And instead, I said the words that would haunt me for the next 10 years. "You know what? Danny, you're right. They are your parents too. But where the hell have you been? Where were you when Dad had that scare with his heart 2 years ago? Where were you when Mom fell and broke her wrist last spring? Where were you when I had to rush Dad to the emergency room because he was having trouble breathing?" Danny's face went pale. "I didn't know about—" "Of course you didn't know. Because you're never here, you're too busy with your big important job and your perfect suburban life to bother with the messy reality of what it means to take care of family. That's not... You want to know what Dad needs? He needs his son to call him more than once a month. He needs his son to show up for more than just major holidays. He needs his son to care enough to notice when he's struggling, not just swoop in with solutions when it's convenient." I was on a roll now, the years of resentment pouring out like water from a broken dam. "But that's not your style, is it? You've always been the one with the quick fix, the easy answer. You just throw money at the problem and it'll go away." "Well, guess what? You can't hire someone to love our parents. You can't outsource caring about family." Danny stood up then, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You sanctimonious bastard. You think you're so much better than me because you live close by? You think proximity equals devotion? I think showing up equals devotion. I show up plenty. I just don't make a career out of it like you do." "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know exactly what it means. And you've been playing the martyr your whole life. Joe, poor Joe, sacrificing everything for everyone else. Poor Joe, too noble to ask for help. Poor Joe, carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. His words hit me like a physical blow. I've never asked for recognition for taking care of our parents. Bullshit. Everything you do is about recognition, Ma. You want everyone to see what a good son you are, what a devoted caretaker you are. You want mom and dad to need you because it makes you feel important. That's not true. Dad, when's the last time you took a vacation? Joe, when's the last time you did something just for yourself? You've wrapped your whole identity around being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never lets anyone down. But what happens when mom and dad are gone? What happens when you don't have anyone to save anymore? I felt something crack inside my chest. At least I'll know I was there. At least I'll know I didn't abandon them when they needed me most. Abandon them? Danny's voice rose an octave. I didn't abandon anyone. When I built a life, young man, when I got married, had kids, created something of my own instead of just hanging around waiting for our parents to need me. You built a life 3 hours away. I built a life, pure kid. Can you say the same? The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the tick of the old clock on the wall, the distant sound of the football game from the living room, the soft whisper of mom's breathing as she sat frozen at the table. Dad finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Boys, please, this isn't a... Stay out of this, Danny snapped, not taking his eyes off me. This is between me and St. Joe here. That's when I lost it completely. Don't you dare talk to him like that. Don't you dare come into this house and disrespect the man who raised you, who worked 2 jobs to pay for your college, who's been nothing but proud of you despite the fact that you can't be bothered to... Enough! Dad's voice cracked like a whip, surprising us both. In all our years of childhood fights, I'd never heard him raise his voice like that. That's enough from both of you. He stood up slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the edge of the table. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. I won't have this in my house. I won't have my sons tearing each other apart over something that should bring us together. He looked at Danny, then at me. You're both my boys. I love you both. And I'm disappointed in both of you right now. The word disappointed hit me harder than any insult Danny could have hurled, but so rarely expressed disapproval that when he did, it carried the force of a judgment from on high. You're scared, he continued, his eyes moving between us. I understand that, I'm scared too. But fear isn't an excuse for cruelty, and it's not an excuse for giving up on each other. Danny's face crumpled slightly. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean... What you mean and what you say aren't always the same thing, son. And words have power. They can heal or they can harm. And you can't always take them back once they're out there. He turned to me, Mom. And you, Joe. Ooh. You've been carrying a lot of weight lately. And I appreciate everything you've done for your mother and me. But Danny's right about one thing. You can't do it all alone. And you can't use your sacrifice as a weapon against your brother. I opened my mouth to argue, but Dad held up a hand to stop me. This conversation is over. You're both going to go to your respective corners, cool off, and think about whether this is really how you want to spend what might be our last Thanksgiving together as a complete family. The words hung in the air like a curse. Our last Thanksgiving together. The possibility that had been lurking in the background of all our recent gatherings. Unspoken, but ever present, Danny looked stricken. Dad, don't say that. You're going to be figure for me. The doctors said a lot of things. But I'm 73 years old with a degenerative disease, and I'm not stupid. I know what's coming, even if we don't know exactly when. Boom, he walked around the table and put one hand on Danny's shoulder and one on mine. I don't want to spend whatever time I have left watching my sons hate each other. I don't want your last memory of me to be this ugly scene in our kitchen." Tears were streaming down Mom's face now, but she wasn't making a sound, just sitting there, watching her family fall apart over dessert. "I'm pardon," I whispered. And then, "I know you are, but you both are, yes, but sorry doesn't fix what's been broken here tonight." Danny wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "What do you want us to do?" "I want you to remember that you're brothers. I want you to remember that when your mother and I are gone, you'll only have each other. And I want you to decide whether your pride is worth more than your family." But even as he said it, I could see in Danny's eyes that the damage was already done. The things we'd said to each other couldn't be unsaid. The wounds we'd opened couldn't be easily closed. Sarah appeared in the doorway then, her face tight with concern. "Danny, the kids are asking when we're going home." Danny looked at me one more time, something unreadable in his expression. "I think we should go." "Danny, wait," I started, but he was already moving toward the door. "No, Joe, Dad's right. We both need to cool off. Both need to think about what happened here tonight." He kissed Mom on the cheek, hugged Dad carefully, and then he was gone, just like that. The sound of his car starting in the driveway was like a door slamming shut. I stood in the kitchen afterward, helping Mom clear the table in silence. The party sat mostly untouched. The careful lattice crust that had taken her hours to create, now just a symbol of the celebration that had imploded. "He'll come around," Mom said quietly as we loaded the dishwasher. "You both will. You're brothers. You love each other." But I wasn't so sure. The look in Danny's eyes as he had left, it wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, more final. It was the look of someone who'd made a decision, drawn a line, and wasn't planning to cross back over it anytime soon. That night, I called him, with the phone ring until it went to voicemail. "Danny, it's me. I know you're probably not ready to talk, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry for what I said tonight. I was out of line, and I know it. Call me when you're ready." He didn't call back. I tried again the next day, and the day after that. For 2 weeks, I left messages that went unanswered. Sarah picked up the phone. "Joe, I think you need to give him some space right now. He's really hurt, and he needs time to process everything. I just want to apologize properly. I want to make things right. I know you do, but he's not ready for that yet. Maybe in a few weeks, when things have settled down." A few weeks turned into a few months. A few months turned into a year. And somewhere along the way, our mutual stubbornness calcified into something harder, more permanent. Freedom, it turns out, and is a terrible thing to feed. The longer you nurture it, the bigger it grows, until it's so large it blocks out everything else, including love, forgiveness, and the simple recognition that being right isn't always worth being alone. I told myself I'd tried to make amends. I'd called, I'd apologized, I'd made the effort. If Danny wanted to hold on to his anger, that was his choice. Well, I had enough to deal with taking care of Mom and Dad without chasing after a brother who clearly didn't want to be found. Danny, I imagine, told himself something similar. That I'd shown my true colors that night, revealed the judgment and superiority I'd been hiding behind a veneer of devotion. That he'd been right about me all along, and now he was finally free to live his life without the weight of my expectations. We both found ways to justify our silence. We both found reasons to keep the walls up. And slowly, gradually, we began to forget what we'd lost in favor of remembering what we gained. The right to be angry, the satisfaction of being wronged, the bitter comfort of knowing we'd been the better person in an argument that had no winners. But the cost of that pride was measured in moments we'd never get back. Christmas came and went without Danny. I watched Dad's face as he looked at the empty chair where Danny usually sat, the unopened gift that Mom had bought anyway. Just in case, New Year's passed in similar fashion. then Easter, then Dad's birthday in May. Each holiday, each milestone, each significant moment that passed without Danny felt like another small death. Not dramatic, not traumatic, but constant. Like a leak in a pipe that you ignore until one day you realize the whole foundation is rotted through. Mom would ask about him sometimes, in the careful way that mothers do when they know the answer will hurt. "Have you talked to Danny lately?" "No, Mom, not lately." "Maybe you should call him." I said to her, "I've called him. I saw him. He doesn't want to talk." She'd thought and changed the subject, but I could see the sadness in her eyes, the confusion. She'd raised two boys who'd been best friends, who'd shared a room until they were teenagers, who'd been each other's confidants and co-conspirators and partners in crime. She couldn't understand how we'd let a single argument destroy decades of brotherhood. Honestly, neither could I. But understanding something and being able to fix it are two different things. And as the months turned into years, the prospect of reaching out to Danny became more daunting, not less. What would I say? How would I begin to bridge a gap that had grown so wide? Meanwhile, Dad's condition was slowly worsening. Not dramatically, he was still himself, still sharp, still capable of living independently, but the tremors were more pronounced. He moved more slowly. Sometimes he'd forget what he was saying mid-sentence, or lose track of what day it was. I found myself spending more and more time at my parents' house, not just for visits, but for practical help, driving Dad to doctor appointments, helping Mom with the grocery shopping, fixing things around the house that Dad's shaking hands couldn't manage anymore. I didn't mind. In fact, I welcomed the busyness, the sense of purpose, the clear way to show my love through action. But I also knew, deep down, that Danny should be part of this. That taking care of our parents shouldn't be a burden carried by one son while the other remained absent. The hardest part was the way Dad would sometimes mention Danny, casually without apparent sadness, but with a wistfulness that broke my heart. "Danny always liked this restaurant," he'd say as we drove past a place where the four of us had eaten dinner years ago. Or, "Your brother was always better at explaining computers than I was." Or, "I wonder how Tommy's doing in school. He must be, 12 now?" Each comment was like a small knife, not because Dad was trying to hurt me, but because they reminded me of all the stories I wasn't hearing, all the updates I wasn't getting, all the connections that had been severed when Danny and I stopped speaking. I knew from Facebook, because yes, I occasionally checked his profile like some kind of digital stalker, that Tommy was indeed doing well in school, that Emma was taking ballet lessons, that Danny had been promoted again at work, that they'd taken a family vacation to Disney World, and everyone looked happy and healthy and completely fine without me in their lives. The knowledge that life was going on without me was somehow both comforting and devastating. Comforting because it meant my absence hadn't destroyed Danny's world. Devastating because it meant my absence hadn't destroyed Danny's world. How do you mourn a relationship that isn't dead, just dormant? How do you grieve for someone who's still alive but might as well be a stranger? 3 years passed, then 5, then 8. 8 years of birthday cards not sent, 8 years of Christmas mornings with one less stocking, 8 years of family photos with a conspicuous absence that no one mentioned but everyone felt. Dad's condition continued its slow decline. He needed help with more things now, buttoning shirts, cutting food, remembering to take his medications. We hired a home health aide, just like Danny had suggested all those years ago. Her name was Patricia, and she was wonderful, patient, kind of professional. Everything that Danny had said she would be. The irony wasn't lost on me that my brother had been right about something I'd fought him so hard against. But admitting that would have required swallowing a pride that had become too large to digest. By year 9, Dad was using a walker, and he'd fallen twice, once in the bathroom, once in the kitchen, and each fall had shaken him more than the last. Not just physically, but emotionally. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd helped me build a treehouse, who'd been my example of strength and capability, was becoming fragile in ways that scared us both. Mom was struggling too, though she tried to hide it. The constant vigilance, the worry, the gradual loss of the man she'd been married to for 53 years, it was taking its toll. She'd aged visibly in the past few years, her hair gone completely white, her movements slower, her laughter less frequent. I was doing my best to help them both, but I was also aware that I was just one person, that the weight of caring for aging parents was supposed to be shared between siblings, not carried alone by man. But Danny might as well have been on another planet for all the contact we'd had. Until that Tuesday morning in March, I was having my morning coffee, reading the newspaper at my kitchen table, when I heard the mail slot in my front door rattle. Nothing unusual about that. The mail came every day around 8:30, and I'd trained myself to ignore it until I was ready to deal with bills and advertisements and the occasional letter from an old friend. But something made me get up that morning. Some instinct, some premonition, some inexplicable pull that drew me to the front door. There, when I gathered on the floor, was the usual collection of envelopes and catalogs, but on top of the pile was a handwritten letter addressed to me in writing I recognized immediately, despite the years that had passed. Danny's handwriting. The same careful script he'd used to write thank you notes as a child, the same distinctive way of forming his letters that I'd seen on countless birthday cards and Christmas lists and notes passed between us during boring family dinners. My hands were shaking as I picked up the envelope. Not from Parkinson's disease, like Dad's shaking, but from something deeper. From the shock of seeing my brother's handwriting after 9 years of silence. From the hope and fear and anticipation that comes with knowing you're about to learn something that will change everything. I sat down right there on the floor of my entryway, still in my pajamas, and stared at the envelope for a long time. Part of me wanted to tear it open immediately, desperate for any connection to the brother I'd lost. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened, somehow afraid of what it might contain. In the end, curiosity won out over fear. I opened the letter carefully, preserving the envelope like it was some kind of precious artifact. The paper inside was simple, just a sheet of white notebook paper, folded in half, but the words written on it would change everything. Joe, I know it's been a long time since we've spoken, and I know that's mostly my fault, and I should have called you back years ago. I should have swallowed my pride and made things right between us, but I didn't. And now I'm afraid it might be too late. Sarah got a call from Mom yesterday. She said Dad's in the hospital. She said it's serious this time. She said I should come home. I'm driving down this afternoon, but before I see you, I wanted you to know something I should have told you 9 years ago. You were right about everything. About me not being there enough. About me not understanding what it meant to take care of family. About me taking the easy way out while you carried the weight of everything. I've regretted that fight every day for 9 years. I've picked up the phone to call you 100 times and hung up before dialing. I've written letters that I never sent. I've driven halfway to Richmond more times than I can count, only to turn around and go home because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. But I need you to know something else. Something that might be more important than my apology, though I hope you'll accept that too. Before I left the hospital yesterday, I stayed with Dad for a few hours while Mom went home to rest. He was sleeping, but you know how he is. He never sleeps deeply in strange places. He kept waking up, looking around and trying to remember where he was. At one point, he opened his eyes and saw me sitting there. He smiled. That same smile he used to give us when we were kids and he'd come home from work and to find us waiting for him. "Danny," he said, his voice so soft I had to lean in to hear him. "I'm glad you're here." Well, I told him I was glad to be there too, that I was sorry it had taken me so long to come. He nodded, like he understood. Then he closed his eyes again, and I thought he had gone back to sleep. But after a few minutes, he spoke again. Your brother, he said, he's been so good to us. Well, it's so good to your mother and me. I don't know what we would have done without him. I told him I knew that I knew you'd been taking care of them. He never complains, Dad continued. Never acts like it's a burden. He just shows up day after day and makes sure we're okay, makes sure we're not alone. His voice was getting weaker, but he kept talking. I worry about him sometimes, about what will happen to him when we're gone. He's given up so much for us. He's sacrificed so much. I hope he knows how grateful we are. I hope he knows how proud I am of the man he's become. Joe, I'm crying as I write this. Crying because I realized, sitting there in that hospital room, that I'd spent 9 years being angry at you for being everything I should have been, for being the son I wanted to be, but wasn't brave enough to become. Dad talked about you for almost an hour, about how you'd driven him to every doctor appointment, about how you'd helped Mom with the shopping and the housework, about how you'd been there for the big things and the small things and all the things in between, Mom. But he also talked about how much he missed having both his boys around, how he'd hoped that someday we'd figure out how to be brothers again, how he'd never stop believing that we could find our way back to each other. I love them both, he said, his eyes still closed. I love them both so much. I just want them to love each other. I don't know if Dad will be awake when I get to the hospital today. I don't know if I'll have another chance to talk to him. But I know this, I can't lose him without first trying to find my way back to you. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I know I hurt you, and I know I've been too proud to make it right. But I'm asking anyway, because life is too short and family is too precious, and I can't bear the thought of losing you both. I'll be at the hospital this afternoon, room 314. I hope you'll be there too. I hope we can find a way to be brothers again, even if it's just for a little while, even if it's just long enough to say goodbye to Dad together. I love you, Joe. I never stopped loving you, even when I was too angry to remember it. Your brother, Danny P. Tommy asked about you sometimes. He remembers the treehouse you helped him build in our backyard 6 years ago. He remembers that you taught him to tie his shoes. He remembers that you used to call him Buddy and always brought him candy when you visited. He doesn't understand why Uncle Joe doesn't come around anymore, and I haven't known how to explain it to him. I hope someday I won't have to. I sat on my entryway floor for a long time after I finished reading, holding the letter in my hands and trying to process everything it contained. The apology I'd waited 9 years to hear, the description of Dad's condition, which sounded more serious than Mom had let on, the vulnerability in Danny's words, so different from the pride and anger that had characterized our last conversation. But mostly, I was thinking about Dad's words, about the way he'd talked about me to Danny with such love and gratitude and pride, about how he'd never stopped hoping that his sons would find their way back to each other. I thought about all the times over the past 9 years when I'd wanted to reach out to Danny, but hadn't. All the moments when I'd swallowed my pride and called, only to be met with silence. All the nights I'd lain awake wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake, if I'd let my stubbornness destroy the most important relationship I'd ever had. And I thought about what Dad had said about sacrifice, about how much I'd given up to take care of them. Oh, it was true, and in a way, I had rearranged my life around their needs, had made their well-being my priority, had chosen duty over personal fulfillment more times than I could count, but it had never felt like sacrifice. It had felt like love, like the most natural thing in the world, like what sons do for the parents who raise them. Reading Danny's letter, though, I realized that my devotion might have looked different from the outside, that what felt like simple love to me might have looked like martyrdom to my brother, that my dedication to our parents might have inadvertently made him feel guilty, inadequate, excluded. I wasn't sure if that made his 9 years of silence forgivable, but it made it understandable. And understanding, I was beginning to realize it might be the first step toward forgiveness when I looked at the clock on my wall, and it was 9:15 in the morning. If Danny was driving down from Baltimore, he'd probably arrive at the hospital around 2 o'clock. That gave me almost 5 hours to decide what I was going to do. I could ignore the letter, pretend I'd never received it, continue nursing the hurt and anger that had sustained me for 9 years. After all, one letter didn't erase 9 years of silence. One apology didn't undo all the birthdays and holidays and important moments that Danny had missed. Or I could do what Dad had apparently been hoping for all these years. I could choose forgiveness over pride. I could choose brotherhood over being right. I could choose love over the comfortable familiarity of being wronged. I picked up the phone and dialed my parents' house. "Hello?" Mom's voice sounded tired, strained. "Mom, it's Joe. I just got Danny's letter." "How is Dad?" She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her crying softly. "He's not good, honey. He had another fall yesterday morning, and when the paramedics got there, he was having trouble breathing. They think he might have had a small stroke." My heart sank. "Why didn't you call me? You were at work, and I didn't want to worry you until we knew more. And then with everything happening so fast, and calling Danny, and trying to figure out what the doctors were saying." Her voice trailed off. "I'm coming to the hospital. You don't have to. I know you have that important meeting today. The meeting can wait. That is more important." "Danny's coming too," she said quietly. "He should be here this afternoon." "I know, and he told me in his letter." "Are you okay with that? Seeing him, I mean?" I thought about it for a moment. Was I okay with seeing my brother after 9 years of silence? Was I ready to face the complicated mix of love and hurt and longing that his presence would inevitably bring up? "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I know Dad would want us both there." "He would," Mom agreed, "but he's been talking about both of you boys so much lately. Almost like he knew there was." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. We both knew what she meant. I spent the rest of the morning trying to distract myself with mundane tasks. I showered, got dressed, I ate breakfast without tasting it, and I called my office and canceled my meetings for the day. I watered my plants, paid some bills, did a load of laundry, but my mind kept returning to Danny's letter, to the words Dad had spoken about me in what might have been his final lucid moments, to the realization that while I'd been feeling abandoned by my brother, he'd been feeling inadequate in comparison to me. Neither of us had been entirely right. Neither of us had been entirely wrong. We'd just been too scared. Imperfect men trying to deal with the slow-motion loss of our father in the only ways we knew how. At noon, I drove to the hospital. Richmond General was a sprawling complex of buildings connected by covered walkways and underground tunnels. I'd been there countless times over the years, for Dad's various tests and procedures, for Mom's broken wrist, for my own emergency appendectomy 5 years earlier. But walking through those automatic doors that day felt different, final, more significant. I found my way to the 3rd floor, to the cardiac unit where they'd moved Dad after his fall. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and floor wax, and that particular combination of hope and despair that seems to permeate all hospitals. Room 314 was at the end of the corridor, and I could see through the partially open door that it was a private room. Mom was sitting in a chair beside the bed, holding Dad's hand and speaking to him in the low, soothing voice she'd used to comfort us when we were sick as children, and I knocked softly on the doorframe. "Mom?" She looked up, and I could see the relief in her eyes. "Joe, thank God you're here." I walked into the room and got my first look at Dad since his fall. He was lying in the hospital bed, connected to various machines that beeped and hummed softly. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and his eyes were closed. But he looked peaceful, not pained. "How is he?" I asked, moving to the other side of the bed. "Stable, For now. The doctors say the stroke was minor, but combined with his Parkinson's and his age, then she shrugged helplessly. They're not sure what to expect. I reached out and touched Dad's hand. His skin was cool, his fingers thinner than I remembered, but his grip was still strong when I squeezed gently. Has he been awake at all today? Off and on, so. He's been asking for you, and for Danny, as if summoned by her words. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, hesitant footsteps that stopped just outside the door. I turned around and saw my brother standing in the doorway, looking older than his 50 years and more uncertain than I'd ever seen him look. His hair was almost completely gray now, and there were lines around his eyes that spoke of years of worry and regret. He was wearing a navy blue suit that suggested he'd driven straight from work, and he was carrying a small bouquet of flowers, daisies, Dad's favorite, and for a moment was hers. We just stared at each other. 9 years of silence, 9 years of hurt and anger and misunderstanding, stretched between us like a chasm. I could see in his eyes the same mixture of emotions I was feeling, love and pain and fear and hope, all tangled together into something too complex for words. "Joe," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Danny." Mom looked back and forth between us, her expression hopeful but cautious. "Boys, please, what here? Not now. It's okay." "Mom," I said, not taking my eyes off my brother. "We're not going to fight." Danny stepped into the room, moving carefully, like he was afraid of disturbing something fragile. He set the flowers on the bedside table and looked down at Dad. "How long has he been like this?" "Since yesterday," I said. "The doctors think he might have had a small stroke when he fell." Danny's face crumpled slightly. "I should have been here sooner. I should have been here all along." "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." But we stood on opposite sides of Dad's bed, two middle-aged men who'd once been inseparable but had spent nearly a decade as strangers. The machines continued their quiet beeping, marking time, measuring breaths, monitoring the steady but fragile rhythm of our father's heart. "I got your letter," I said. Danny nodded. "I wasn't sure if I should send it, and I've written you so many letters over the years, but I never had the courage to mail them. I'm glad you did. Ben, this one. Are you glad?" I thought about it for a moment. Was I glad, or was I just tired of carrying the weight of our mutual silence? "I'm glad you told me what Dad said. I'm glad you apologized. I'm glad you're here. But I'm still angry, Danny. I'm still hurt. 9 years is a long time to be angry and hurt." He nodded, his eyes filling with tears. I know I hurt you. I know I wasn't there when you needed me to be. I know I let my pride keep me away from family, from the people I love most." "What did you?" I asked. "Why did you stay away so long?" Danny was quiet for a long moment, his hand resting on Dad's arm. "Because I was ashamed. Because every time I thought about coming back, I had to face the fact that you were right about me. That I was selfish and absent and more concerned with my own life than with taking care of the people who raised me. I wasn't right about everything. You were right about the things that mattered. I was a fair-weather son. Joe, see, I showed up for the good times and left you to handle the hard stuff. And instead of trying to do Peter, I got defensive and angry and walked away. I could have handled it better too. I could have been less judgmental, less self-righteous. I could have tried harder to understand your perspective. Your perspective was that I should have been a better son. You were right." Ade's eyes fluttered open then, and both of us immediately focused on him. He looked confused at first, the way people do when they wake up in unfamiliar surroundings. But then his gaze settled on me, and he smiled weakly. "Joe," he said, his voice hoarse but clear. "You came, so of course I came. I'm always here." Micah, he turned his head slightly and saw Danny standing on the other side of the bed. For a moment, I thought he might not recognize him. The stroke, the medication, the general confusion of being in the hospital. But then his face lit up with the same joy I'd seen when we were children, and he'd come home from work to find us waiting for him. "Danny," he whispered. "Both my boys. You're both here." Danny leaned down and kissed Dad's forehead. "I'm here. I'm so sorry I wasn't here before." "You're here now," Dad said, echoing my words from earlier. "That's what matters." Mom had moved closer to the bed, and the four of us formed a circle around Dad, the same family constellation we'd maintained for decades, minus the years when one of us had been missing. "I need to tell you boys something," Dad said, his voice gaining strength, something I should have said a long time ago. "Dad, you don't need to," I started. "Yes, I do. I need to say this while I still can." He looked at me, then at Danny, then back at me. "I'm proud of both of you. I'm proud of the men you have become, the lives you've built, the families you've created." He paused, gathering his strength. "Joe, you've been my rock these past few years. You've taken care of your mother and me with such love and devotion. You've sacrificed so much, and I know it hasn't always been easy, but you've never complained, never made us feel like a burden. You've shown us what it means to love unconditionally." I felt tears streaming down my face. "I love you. Taking care of you and Mom has never been a sacrifice. I know that, but I also know what it's cost you. And I want you to know that when I'm gone, I want you to live your life. I want you to find your own happiness. Not just spend your time taking care of other people." He turned to Danny. "And you've built a beautiful life. You've been a good husband, a good father, a good maybe. I know you think you haven't done enough for us, but that's not true. You've made us proud in ways you don't even realize." Danny was crying now too. "I should have been here more. I should have helped Joe. I should have been a better son. You were the son you were capable of being at the time. We all do the best we can with what we have. But I need you both to promise me something." "Anything," I said. "Promise me you'll take care of each other. Promise me you'll remember that you're brother, that you love each other, that you need each other. Promise me you won't let pride keep you apart again." I looked across the bed at Danny, seeing not the successful businessman who'd hurt me 9 years ago, but the little boy who'd shared a room with me, who'd been my best friend and partner in crime, who'd cried in my arms when he'd broken his arm falling out of the oak tree in our backyard. "I promise I didn't," I said. "I promise too," Danny whispered. Bayaden, seemingly satisfied. "Well, good. That's good. Now I need to rest, but I'm so glad you're both here. I'm so glad my boys found their way back to each other." He closed his eyes, and within minutes, he was sleeping peacefully. But something had changed in the room. The tension that had existed between Danny and me since he'd arrived had lifted, replaced by something that felt like possibility. We spent the rest of the afternoon in that hospital room, taking turns holding Dad's hand, talking quietly with Mom, and slowly, carefully, beginning to rebuild the bridge that had been destroyed 9 years earlier. Danny told me about his kids, about Tommy's success on the baseball team, and Emma's passion for art. He told me about his job, about the promotion he'd received 6 months earlier, about the house they'd bought in a neighborhood with better schools. I told him about my work, about the consulting business I'd started 2 years earlier, about the book I'd been writing about caring for aging parents. So I told him about the trips I'd taken with Mom and Dad, about the small victories and daily challenges of helping them maintain their independence. We didn't talk about the fight. We didn't rehash the things we'd said to each other or try to assign blame or guilt. We just talked, like brothers do, like we hadn't done in far too long. And as the afternoon wore on, other family members began to arrive. Our cousin Mike from Norfolk, our Aunt Susan from Charlottesville, and old family friends who'd known Dad for decades and wanted to pay their respects. Each arrival brought the same reaction, surprise and reply at seeing Danny and me in the same room. Obviously reconciled, obviously at peace with each other, I realized how much our estrangement had affected not just us, but everyone who loved us. "It's about time," Aunt Susan said, hugging us both. "Your father has been worried sick about you too." "We're okay now," Danny said, and I was surprised to realize that it felt true. Aw. That evening, after the visitors had gone and Mom had been convinced to go home and rest, Danny and I sat alone with Dad in the quiet hospital room. He was sleeping soundly, his breathing steady and peaceful. "I keep thinking about what he said," Danny said softly, "about taking care of each other." "Me too. I don't know how to do that yet, and I don't know how to be a brother again after all this time." "I don't either, but I want to try." Danny nodded. "I want to try too. I want my kids to know their uncle. I want to be part of this family again." "You never stopped being part of this family. Danny, you just forgot for a while." "We both forgot." "Yeah, we both forgot." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Dad sleep, listening to the steady beeping of the machines that were monitoring his vital signs. It was the first time in 9 years that we'd been in the same room without tension, without anger, without the weight of unspoken grievances hanging between us. "I need to tell you something," Danny said eventually. "Something I should have said years ago." "What's that?" "You were right to be angry with me. You were right to call me out for not being there. I was selfish and lazy, and I took the easy way out while you did the hard work of being a good son." "Danny, let me finish. I need to say this." He took a deep breath. "I spent 9 years being angry at you for being everything I should have been, for being devoted and selfless and present, for showing up when it mattered and never complaining about it. I resented you for making me look bad by comparison. You didn't look bad. You just looked absent. Same thing, in the end. But here's what I realized. Sitting in this hospital room today, watching you with Mom and Dad, you didn't become the devoted son to make me look bad. You became the devoted son because that's who you are. Because you love them. Because taking care of people is what you do. I love you too, Danny. I always have. I know. And I love you. Even when I was too proud to admit it, even when I was too angry to remember it, I loved you. So what do we do now? We start over. We figure out how to be brothers again. We keep the promise we made to Dad. It's not going to be easy. We're different people than we were 9 years ago. And I know but we're also the same people we've always been, underneath all the hurt and anger. We are still the bones who built that treehouse in the backyard. We are still the teenagers who stayed up all night talking about girls and dreams and what we wanted to do with our lives. We're still brothers. We're still brothers. Dad passed away peacefully 3 days later, with both of his sons holding his hands and his wife of 53 years whispering words of love in his ear. He slipped away quietly, without struggle or apparent pain, surrounded by the family he'd loved so completely. The funeral was everything Dad would have wanted. Simple, heartfelt, filled with stories and laughter and tears. Danny and I stood together at the graveside, supporting each other and Mom as we said goodbye to the man who'd shaped us both, who'd taught us about love and loyalty and the importance of family. But the most important moment came after the service. When we were back at Mom's house, surrounded by casseroles and condolence cards and the gentle chaos of family gatherings, Danny and I found ourselves alone in the backyard, standing under the oak tree where we'd played as children. "I keep thinking about what he said," Danny said, his voice thick with emotion. "About taking care of each other." "I don't know. Me too. I don't want to waste any more time, Joe. I don't want to let pride or stubbornness or fear keep us apart anymore." "Neither do I. So what do we do? How do we make sure this doesn't happen again?" I thought about it for a moment. We stay in touch. We call each other regularly. We make an effort to be part of each other's lives. And if we fight again, if we disagree about something, then we remember this conversation. We remember Dad's words. We remember that being right isn't worth losing each other. Danny nodded. I want Tommy and Emma to know about you. I want them to have the kind of relationship with their uncle that we had with Uncle Bob when we were kids. I'd like that too. And I want to help with Mom. Know you have been carrying that responsibility alone for too long. I'd like that as well. We stood there in the gathering dusk. Two middle-aged men who'd rediscovered what it meant to be brothers, who'd learned that love is stronger than pride, that family is more important than being right. You know what Dad would say if he could see us now? Danny asked. What? He'd say it's about damn time. I laughed. And it felt good. It felt like healing. It felt like coming home. Osa. The months that followed weren't always easy. There were moments of awkwardness, times when we had to consciously choose forgiveness over resentment, occasions when the old patterns of hurt and defensiveness threatened to reassert themselves. But we kept our promise to Dad. We stayed in touch. We made an effort. We remembered that we were brothers, that we loved each other, that we needed each other. Danny started calling every Sunday just to check in, and I started making the drive to Baltimore once a month, spending weekends with his family, getting to know my nephew and niece again. We took turns visiting Mom, making sure she wasn't alone, helping her adjust to life without Dad. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt what we'd lost. But the exact same relationship we'd had before, we were different people now, changed by time and experience and loss, but something new, something deeper, something more intentional. We talked about Dad often, sharing memories and stories we'd never told each other. We talked about the fight that had driven us apart. Not to assign blame, but to understand how we'd let pride become more important than love. And we talked about the future, about growing old together, about being uncles to each other's children, about carrying on the legacy of love and loyalty that Dad had modeled for us. Well, 6 months after Dad's death, Danny called me on a Tuesday evening. It was outside our normal Sunday routine, and I could hear something different in his voice. Joe, I need to tell you something. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. It's just... Go on, Sarah and I have been talking, and we've made a decision. We're moving back to Virginia. What? I got an offer from a company in Richmond. It's a good job, good money, and it would put us about 20 minutes from Mom, 20 minutes from you. Danny, that's wonderful, though. But are you sure? What about your job in Baltimore? What about the kids' schools? The kids will adjust, and they're young, and they're excited about being closer to their grandmother and their uncle. And as for my I've learned that some things are more important than career advancement. Like what? Like family. Like being there when it matters. Like not letting distance become an excuse for absence. When would you move? This summer. We've already started looking at houses. We found one in the same neighborhood where we grew up. Actually, just a few streets over from our old house. Full circle, Full circle, well, he agreed. That summer, I helped Danny and his family move into their new house. It was a warm Saturday in July, and we spent the day carrying boxes and furniture, assembling beds and hanging pictures. Bonnie and Emma were excited about their new rooms, about the bigger backyard, about being close to their grandmother. At the end of the day, we sat on Danny's new front porch, drinking beer and watching the kids play in the yard. It was the kind of simple, peaceful moment that I'd missed for 9 years, just two brothers, together, part of each other's lives again. You know what I keep thinking about? Danny said. Watching Tommy push Emma on the tire swing we'd hung from the oak tree in the backyard. What? That letter I wrote to you. The one that started all this. What about it? I almost didn't send it. I wrote it and rewrote it a dozen times. I kept thinking that 9 years was too long, that too much had happened, that you'd never forgive me. I'm glad you sent it. So am I, but I keep wondering, what if I hadn't? What if I'd let pride win again? What if we'd both been too stubborn to make the first move? Then we would have lost each other forever. And Dad would have died knowing that his sons couldn't forgive each other. But that's not what happened. You did send the letter. We did forgive each other. One died knowing that his boys had found their way back to each other. Danny nodded. I just hope other people don't make the same mistake we did. I hope they don't let pride keep them from the people they love. Me too. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the neighborhood where we'd grown up, where we'd learned what it meant to be brothers, where we'd now be neighbors again. I've been thinking about writing a book, Danny said eventually. About what? About us. About what we went through. About how we almost lost each other and how we found our way back. That's a good idea. People need to hear stories like that. Would you help me? Would you tell your side of the story? Of course, White Doll. I want to call it The Letter, because that's what changed everything. That's what brought us back together. The Letter, I repeated. I like it, and I want to dedicate it to the man who never stopped believing that his sons could love each other. He'd like that. As the evening wore on, other family members began to arrive. Mom came over with a casserole and stories about the neighborhood. Our cousin Mike stopped by with his wife and kids. Old friends from the neighborhood came to welcome Danny's family back home. It was the kind of gathering that Dad would have loved, family and friends coming together, sharing food and stories and laughter, the kind of gathering that had been missing one crucial element for 9 years, but was now complete again. But later that night, after everyone had gone home and the kids were asleep, Danny and I sat in his living room, surrounded by boxes that still needed to be unpacked. We were tired from the day's work, but it was a good tired, a satisfied tired. I never thought I'd be back here, Danny said, looking around at the house that was so similar to the one we'd grown up in. I never thought you'd want to be back here. I didn't, for a long time. This place represented everything I was trying to get away from, the expectations, the responsibilities, the small town life. I thought success meant leaving all this behind. And now? Now I realize that success means being where you belong. And I belong here, with my family, with you. I'm glad you're back. Me too. We talked until late that night, the way we used to when we were kids sharing a room, whispering in the dark long after we were supposed to be asleep. We talked about our memories of growing up in this neighborhood, about the friends we'd shared, about the dreams we'd had as children. But we also talked about the future, about the relationship we wanted to build going forward, about the kind of uncles we wanted to be to each other's children, about the way we wanted to honor Dad's memory by being the brothers he'd always believed we could be. I want to make a promise, Danny said as we were finally getting ready to call it a night. What kind of promise? I want to promise that I'll never let pride come between us again, that no matter what happens, no matter how angry we get at each other, I'll always remember that you're my brother and I love you. I promise that too. And I promise that I'll be there for you the way you were there for Mom and Dad, that I'll be the kind of brother you deserve. You already are. I want to be better. I want to be the man Dad raised me to be. We both do. And we'll help each other get there. 3 years have passed since Danny moved back to Virginia. 3 years of Sunday dinners and family gatherings and shared responsibilities. 3 years of watching our relationship heal and grow stronger than it had ever been before. Tommy is 14 now, and he's become the kind of nephew I always hoped to have. He comes to my house after school sometimes, and we work on homework together, or just talk about baseball and girls and what he wants to do with his life. He calls me Uncle Joe, and when he says it, I hear the same affection I used to feel for Uncle Bob when I was his age. Emma is 12, and she's inherited her grandmother's artistic talent and her father's stubborn streak. She's been teaching me to paint watercolors, mostly of the garden behind my house. I'm terrible at it, but she's patient with me in the way that only children can be with the adults they love. Danny and I have found our rhythm as brothers again. We talk on the phone several times a week, see each other at least once a week, and make sure to be present for all the important moments in each other's lives. We've also kept our promise to Dad about taking care of Mom, and she's doing well for her age, but she's slowing down, and she needs more help than she used to. Instead of that responsibility falling entirely on me, as it had for so many years, Danny and I share it. We alternate weeks taking her to doctor appointments, and we both help with her grocery shopping and housekeeping. We both make sure she's not alone on holidays or special occasions, and it's made a difference for all of us. Mom is happier because she gets to see both of her sons regularly. Danny feels more connected to the family he'd been absent from for so long, and I feel less burdened, more supported, more like I have a partner in the important work of caring for the people we love. But the biggest change has been in our relationship with each other. We're not the same brothers we were before the fight. We're better. We're more intentional about our connection, more appreciative of what we have, more aware of how easily it could be lost. We've learned to apologize quickly when we hurt each other. We've learned to forgive easily when we're hurt. We've learned that being right is less important than being together. But most importantly, we've learned that love is a choice. It's not just a feeling that happens to you. It's a decision you make over and over again to choose the people who matter most to you, even when it's hard, even when they disappoint you, even when your pride is telling you to walk away. That lesson cost us 9 years of brotherhood, but it's a lesson we'll carry with us for the rest of our lives. The book Danny wanted to write about our experience became a reality last year. The letter, A Story of Pride and Forgiveness, and the Unbreakable Bond of Brothers, was published by a small regional press, and it's found its way into the hands of families all over the country who are struggling with their own estrangements. We've received hundreds of letters and emails from people who've read our story and found the courage to reach out to their own estranged family members, siblings who hadn't spoken in years, parents and children who'd let pride keep them apart, cousins and friends who'd lost touch over old grievances. Each letter reminds us that our story isn't unique, that families everywhere are struggling with the same challenges we faced: the difficulty of forgiveness, the persistence of pride, the way small hurts can grow into large wounds if left untended. But they also remind us that love is stronger than pride, that family is more important than being right, that it's never too late to choose forgiveness over resentment, connection over isolation, love over fear. Just last month, we received a letter that particularly moved us. It was from a woman in Oregon whose brother had sent her a copy of our book after they'd been estranged for 15 years. Joe and Danny, I want to thank you for sharing your story. My brother Mark and I had a terrible fight 15 years ago over our mother's care. Like you, we both thought we were right. Like you, we both let pride keep us from making the first move toward reconciliation. Our mother died 5 years ago, and we stood on opposite sides of her grave. Two strangers who had once been inseparable. I thought that was the end of any chance we had of being a family again. But then Mark sent me your book. He included a note that said, "I don't want to spend another 15 years being angry at the person I love most." The note was only one sentence long, but it changed everything. We met for coffee last week for the first time in 15 years. We talked for 4 hours. We cried twice, we apologized. We remembered why we loved each other. We're not where we want to be yet. We're still learning how to be siblings again, but we're trying. And that's more than we had before. Thank you for showing us that it's never too late to choose love over pride. Thank you for proving that families can heal, even after years of silence. With gratitude. Linda letters like Linda's remind us why we decided to share our story. Not because we want attention or praise, but because we want to help other families avoid the mistakes we made. Because we want to show people that estrangement doesn't have to be permanent, that love can overcome even the deepest hurts, that it's never too late to choose forgiveness. Danny and I speak at conferences now, to family counselors and therapists, and anyone who works with families in crisis. And we share our story not as experts, but as brothers who learned the hard way that pride is a luxury that families can't afford. We talk about the warning signs of estrangement, the gradual decrease in communication, the building resentment, the way small disagreements can become major conflicts if not addressed. We talk about the cost of silence, the years of memories that can't be recovered, the relationships that suffer when families are divided, but we also talk about hope. About the possibility of reconciliation, about the power of a simple apology, a heartfelt letter, a willingness to be vulnerable enough to take the first step toward healing. Because that's what we've learned. Somebody has to go first, and somebody has to be brave enough to set aside their pride and reach out. And somebody has to be willing to risk rejection in order to restore connection. In our case, it was Danny who went first. Danny who wrote the letter. Danny who chose love over pride. But it could have been me. It should have been both of us. Much earlier, for 9 years of silence had passed. The specific details of our story aren't what matter. What matters is the universal truth at its heart, that families are fragile, that love requires intention, that forgiveness is a choice that has to be made over and over again. And what matters is that it's never too late to choose love, never too late to pick up the phone, write the letter, make the first move toward reconciliation. Never too late to remember that the people you love are more important than being right. This week, Danny and I were cleaning out Dad's old workshop in Mom's basement. We'd been putting it off for 3 years. But Mom finally decided she wanted to convert the space into a craft room where she could work on her quilting projects. As we sorted through Dad's tools and supplies, we found a box of letters he'd kept over the years. Were birthday cards from us when we were children, thank you notes from friends and neighbors, sympathy cards from Mom's illness years ago. But at the bottom of the bind, we found something that took our breath away. It was a letter Danny had written to Dad, but never sent. It was dated 2 years into our estrangement, and it was clear from the content that he'd been struggling with our separation. I know you're disappointed in me for the way things ended with Joe. I know you want us to work things out, and I want that too. But I don't know how to make the first move. I don't know how to apologize for something I still think I was partly right about. I miss talking to him about work and life and all the things brothers talk about. I miss his advice. I miss his laugh. I miss feeling like I have a partner in taking care of you and Mom. But I also don't know how to get past the things he said to me, how to forgive the way he made me feel like a failure as a son, how to rebuild something that feels so broken. I keep thinking about calling him, but then I remember how angry he was, how disappointed he looked, and I lose my nerve. I keep thinking about driving down to Richmond, but then I imagine him slamming the door in my face. I know this is hurting you and Mom. I know it's not what you want for your sons, but I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to be the bigger man. I love you, Poatin. I love Joe too, even though I'm too proud to tell him. I just don't know how to get from here to there. Your son, Danny. Writing that letter, I realized that Danny had been struggling with our estrangement just as much as I had. That he'd wanted to reconcile just as desperately as I had. That we'd both been waiting for the other to make the first move. Both too proud to be the one to extend the olive branch. I also realized that Dad must have known about Danny's internal struggle. That he'd kept this letter, maybe hoping that someday his sons would find it and understand how much they'd both been hurting. He knew, Danny said quietly, holding the letter in his hands. Dad knew we both wanted to fix things. He knew we were both too stubborn to do it. I wonder if that's why he talked about us so much at the end. If he was hoping that one of us would finally find the courage to reach out. Maybe. Or maybe he just wanted us to know that he loved us both, no matter what. We sat in Dad's workshop for a long time that day, surrounded by his tools and his memories, thinking about the years we'd lost and the years we'd found again, thinking about the power of forgiveness and the importance of family and the way love can survive even the deepest wounds. But mostly, we were thinking about how grateful we were that Danny had finally found the courage to write that letter, the one he did send, the one that changed everything. Because that's what courage looks like sometimes. Not the grand gestures or the dramatic moments, but the quiet decision to pick up a pen and write the words that need to be said. The willingness to be vulnerable, to admit you were wrong, to take the risk of reaching out to someone who might not reach back. That's what Danny did for us. He went first. He chose love over pride. He wrote the letter that brought us back together. And because of that choice, we're here today. Not just as brothers who've survived estrangement, but as brothers who've learned that love is stronger than pride, that family is more important than being right, that it's never too late to choose forgiveness. We're here as uncles to each other's children, as partners in caring for our aging mother, as friends who've learned to value each other's presence in our lives. And we're here as living proof that families can heal, that relationships can be restored, that love can overcome even the deepest hurts. But most importantly, we're here as brothers. Not the same brothers we were before the fight, but better brothers, more intentional brothers. Brothers who know how precious and fragile family connections are, who never take each other for granted, who choose each other every day. And that, my friends, and is the real gift of the letter Danny sent me that March morning. Not just the reconciliation it made possible, but the deeper understanding it gave us about what it means to love someone unconditionally, what it means to be family, what it means to choose forgiveness over resentment, connection over isolation, love over fear. If you're listening to this story tonight and thinking about someone you've lost touch with, someone you've been estranged from, someone you love but haven't spoken to in too long, I want you to remember something. It's not too late. It's never too late to write the letter, make the phone call, send the text message that says, I miss you, I love you, I want to try again. It's never too late to choose love over pride. It's never too late to be the one who goes first. Because here's what Danny and I learned. The person who makes the first move toward reconciliation isn't the weaker person. They're the braver person. They're the person who understands that love is more important than being right, that family is more precious than pride, that life is too short to waste on silence and separation. The letter Danny wrote to me was only 2 pages long, but it contained everything that mattered: an apology, an expression of love, an invitation to try again. It contained the words that had the power to heal 9 years of hurt and anger and misunderstanding. And your letter doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be honest, vulnerable, and willing to take the first step toward healing. Because somewhere out there, someone is waiting for your letter. Someone is hoping you'll be brave enough to reach out. Someone is carrying the same hurt and longing that you are, wondering if it's too late to fix what's been broken. Yeah, it's not too late. It's never too late to choose love. It's never too late to remember that you're family. And sometimes all it takes is a letter to remind you both of what you've never really lost, the unbreakable bond of love that connects you, no matter how many years have passed, no matter how deep the wounds, no matter how high the walls of pride have grown. So if you're thinking about someone tonight, don't wait. Don't let another day pass in silence. Don't let pride keep you from the people you love most. Write the letter. Make the call. Take the risk. Because the person on the other end might be waiting for exactly that. They might be hoping for exactly that. They might be praying for exactly that. And you might just discover, and as Danny and I did, that love is stronger than pride, that family is more important than being right, and that it's never too late to come home to the people who matter most. And thank you for walking this journey with me tonight, for listening to the story of two brothers who lost each other and found their way back home. If this story has touched something in you, if it's reminded you of someone you have been missing, if it's given you hope that broken relationships can be healed, then maybe you'll join me for more stories like this one, because we all need reminders that we're not alone in this complicated business of loving people, of being family, of choosing forgiveness over pride. We all need to hear that it's possible to heal, to rebuild, to start again. Take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, it's never too late to choose love. Until next time, keep your hearts open and your pride in check. And never ever give up on the possibility that the letter you write, the call you make, the risk you take to reach out to someone you love might just be the beginning of the most beautiful chapter of your story. Letter from my estranged brother taught me that love is always worth the risk, always worth the vulnerability, always worth choosing over pride. And that's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.